Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pick and Pop podcast. This is our third episode. As always, I'll be your host, Colby Jacobino, joined by my co-host, Brett Roberts. And today we have a special episode. It's our first guest that we've had on the podcast. We were fortunate enough to get Oliver Maroney from Basketball Insiders. Oliver, how's it going, man?
It's going well, guys. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. Brett, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm just trying to wake up the rest of the way. I'm going to let you guys carry this first part.
No doubt. So, Oliver, this is something that we plan on doing with our guests. I was talking with Brett when we were kind of brainstorming different ideas of who to have on. And right away, kind of you came to my mind because I want to kind of get writers who are, up and coming in this industry. And, we've written at similar sites such as Hoops Habit, Today's Fast Break, stuff like that. But, you, in my mind, you've made it, man. You got picked up by Basketball Insiders. You'll be covering the Blazers and the NBA as a whole for them. But really, when we have guests on, I thought you'd be the perfect fit because you've went through all the stuff that, guys like myself, are trying to do and trying to accomplish. So, for the first part, I just want to kind of sit back and allow you to reveal your journey in this business, when you discovered your passion for writing, what websites you really worked with, and how you got to the point that you are today. So, I'm going to kind of take a step back and let you go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been a long road. I've had a passion for basketball since I was a little kid. I mean, playing in kindergarten, preschool, etc. And I just love the game of basketball. I love playing it. I love talking about it. Portland native, basically. I mean, I was born in California, but moved up here really, really early in my life. So I've been around the Portland Trailblazers for a long time and really grew an interest in watching them play. And my family was extremely supportive of the Portland Trailblazers as a whole. So I watched essentially as many games as I possibly could during the season, going back to, Damon Stoudemire, Rasheed Wallace. You can even go to like Clyde Drexler. We used to watch old game tape and stuff. But that's how my interest started, I guess you could say, is really playing the game of basketball and understanding how hard it is and how difficult it is to kind of run an offense and play this game that everybody loves to watch. And it's very up and down. It's very quick. Football, it takes a long time to score a touchdown. It may be a game where it's 7-9 or these low scoring games. I didn't really have a full interest in football or even soccer to an extent. As far as watching it goes, because it's hard to analyze something where there's not much scoring going on, and that entertainment value is so much higher, I think, for basketball as a whole. So I started out watching the games, just kind of digesting what I could, and then when I was in middle school, actually, I was approached. A friend of mine that was a couple years older than me knew the Oregonian editor, and he basically kind of threw it out there that they were looking for people to cover high school sports and essentially just doing these little tiny game recaps and basically being the statistician, so doing all the game stats, rebounds, blocks, points, etc. for each team. So I didn't get a chance really to watch the game very often. I was almost always on a piece of paper, basically checkboxing different stats and doing it literally by hand. I mean, I didn't have a laptop, and so that was the way I did things. So I wrote little game recaps, probably a paragraph long, that would be clipped into the Oregonian in the back page where nobody would read it or even care about it really. And my name wasn't even on the game recap. It was really there was 20 game recaps for all the high school games around Portland, and then at the bottom it said from contributors, and then my name was there, and I thought it was super awesome and cool. But that's how I started developing this idea of man, this is enjoyable. I get to go to basketball games. I'm getting paid, and yes, it was $10 a game, I think. So it really, for the work that I was doing, it's maybe 2.5 hours, a basketball game, depending on how long it's going to be, if it goes to overtime, etc. But I really got a likening to just getting more knowledge about the game and seeing how people grow and interact. And high school sports is very interesting because players aren't paid to play, obviously, right? So they do it because they love it. And so for me, it's immediately started gravitating towards some of the guys that played in high school. I mean, you talk about some of the players that have helped me. Terrence Ross, Terrence Jones developed in the Portland area. Both those guys are in the NBA now. Andrew Andrews just signed with the Charlotte Hornets. You can go down the list of guys from Portland that have kind of developed and grew into these players, but I've had connections with these guys for a long time because I was covering them in high school when, very, very few people were talking about them at that point in their career. So I'd say that is a really big piece of why I started getting into kind of the relationship aspect and really interested in these guys' stories. I mean, you look at some of these guys. Terrence Ross came from a pretty rough background in North Portland. Had a lot of potential to be this amazing NBA player. Got drafted really high. Went to University of Washington. There's just a lot of intriguing storylines, and so for me, it was like, man, I want to get these stories. I want to start writing about these players. It intrigued me, and that's where I started getting into writing. So I went from the Oregonian to kind of doing my own blog. I created like 3 different blogs. I probably deleted all of them by now, but I created my own little blogs, and I don't think anybody was reading them. But the fact of the matter was, I just wanted to write about basketball. Like, where can I do it? Well, I'm 15 and a half. How do I, 14 and a half? How do I, get to writing at these big websites and these big places? And that's when the internet started taking off and everything else. And so that's where I started. And then I was approached about a year later. I went to Summer League and I got a bunch of information. I went and, there's some great media members that have grown into bigger, like, national roles. Ben Golliver is one specifically that I kind of tip my hat to. He helped me a ton. I got to know him and get connected with him when he was in Portland. And we've stayed connected for a very long time. So he really helped me kind of grow as a writer, kind of made me understand some of the things that were needed in order to go to the next level. So that used Ben quite a bit. And then I went to Summer League. And like I said, that's where this gets a little bit more intriguing. I go to Summer League. I get connected with Kristen Ledlow. And actually, it was from Inside Stuff, her first year, that I was really impressed with. And I grew to really kind of enjoy the Inside Stuff crew overall, just like how they were doing things. And so every once in a while I would just tweet at her. And this is like when I had like I said, barely in high school, moving into college, I would tweet at her and she would either like the tweet and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal, like freaking out, like, and it's like, man, they really listen to some of this stuff. So once I started realizing that I could potentially write, and I had some of the backbone to do it and a little bit of experience, that's when I started reaching out to people on Twitter and like, hey, I'd love to tell your story. Is there any chance that you can direct message me? Just like basically, I mean, I see it all the time on Twitter from people like, hey, DM me,
Yeah.
I tried to make it unique and different, but this is like kind of before the like Twitter exploded time. So I think that I was in there just a little bit earlier than most. And not many people were like comfortable with just publicly saying like, hey, Kristen, can you, can you give me 15 minutes of your time? Because I know you're super busy and you're probably not going to have enough time. But I got connected with Kristen, went down to Summer League. We met. I talked a bunch about kind of her career and got into kind of how she did things and wrote a big article on it. And she really liked it. And it turned into this huge kind of deal. A lot of people shared it, retweeted it, and started following me. And that's when I knew that I could potentially make something out of this. That's really like the start of me kind of growing into this writer and developing all these skills and like figuring out what I wanted to do. I was approached by Daily Fantasy Cafe. It's like a small fantasy website, and they asked me if I wanted to do like exclusive pieces on some of the players and get to know some of these guys and hopefully attach like fantasy players to the actual players to give them kind of an insight into why they should draft certain guys or why this player could have a breakout year. So I did a piece on Terrence Jones, a couple other guys in the league, and that's where I got started. Then I decided, fantasy's great, but I'd really like to get into actually writing about basketball. Fantasy points and all this other stuff, like it made sense to me. It was great for the time being, but I wanted to get into basketball. So today's Fast Break, Hoops Critic was kind of one of the first ones that I got onto with Brian Geltzeiler, and he helped me along the way. And from there, I mean, like I said, I wrote it Today's Fast Break, Hoops Critic, and Hoops Habit, all basically at the same time. And that was like a 6-month progression for me, kind of understanding different editors' styles and like what they liked and what they didn't. And then, you know, after writing for them and kind of trying to get pieces here and there and do whatever I can, I moved from there to about.com. They had reached out to me and were like, hey, we want this NBA editor job to be yours. And they reached out. They said, we really liked your work. You get exclusives all the time. And, you know, we really like what you do. Went to about.com and started kind of having a couple contributors under me, and went from writing to a little more editing and also writing. So it was definitely a change for me, kind of understanding people's writing styles and trying to develop just every part that I possibly could. And I did that. About.com basically this past summer in like July had emailed me and were like, you know, unfortunately we're taking down the site, you know, whatever the reason was. I actually don't know the backstory behind it. It was just basically in an email it came out that they were basically going away from sports in general. And
Wow.
Oliver, sorry, we love you, but yeah, we're basically getting rid of you. So move on from that. And the guys at about.com were great. Like, they're really, really good people. It's just, like I said, it just didn't work out. They had to move in a different direction. And that's how Insiders came about. I kind of announced it on Twitter that I was kind of going to be looking for some place to write. And Alex Kennedy and I have been back and forth for like a year and a half. And yeah, he approached me about potentially writing at Basketball Insiders and becoming part of their team. And that's where I am today. Sorry for the long story.
No, man, no, I want people to hear your journey, because I mean, and I'm not ashamed at all. You know, we're the same age bracket. I believe we're the same age, both 24. And,
yeah.
You know, I have no shame in saying that, you know, I look up to you. I read your work all the time, and I try to implement, you know, your writing skills into my own pieces within my own style. You know, dating.
We all learn from each other, man. We all learn from each other. You know, I try and read everything I can. So.
Yeah, we really do. And, you know, I'm kind of getting started late in this whole game. I started writing about a year and a half ago for the first time. And my motivation was, you know, I was playing college ball and everything, but I just wanted to get my opinion out there somehow. And, you know, like you said, just started up a couple of stupid blogs. And, you know, then from there, I just tried to reach out to other websites. But, you know, like you, I did the whole Twitter DM thing, you know, where you're asking players, you know, guys who are you know, fringe players trying to make a team, just so I could have something that, you know, to my name that I was trying to get out there and do something. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
And I'm still on that journey, and I'm trying to embrace the grind. But I definitely wanted, you know, you to get out here and listen. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've heard your story about 2 or 3 times just off podcast, but you know, I wanted to hear a little bit more. And you definitely did that for us today. And I just, you know, I'm really looking for, I think I speak for Brett and myself when I say, you know, I'm really looking forward to the work you put in at Basketball Insiders this year. And you know, I expect nothing but great content to be out. And so, you know, finally wrapping up this kind of, you know, the piece, this part of the podcast about you, I just want, you know, to say congratulations. And, you know, I'm sure you're going to be doing really big things this year.
I appreciate it, man. You know, look, this journey and this sort of stuff is great to see. I think NBA, Twitter in general is very supportive of everyone. You know, one thing that Ben and actually Amin Al Hassan and some other guys have told me is like, you're only as good as your last piece. So every day when I'm writing, or every night when I'm writing and approaching this, it's really about, how can I create the greatest piece? You know, this is my next big piece. And you can't approach it any other way. And I think that, along with, you know, honesty, like I said, I really, I wanted to share other people's stories. Like, and I don't know if a lot of players, you know, there's so much media out there that's portraying them in a negative light, or taking quotes from a bigger quote and making it a big story or a big deal. And for me, that's not what I'm trying to do here. My job is to portray and take these stories and make sense of it all and put it on paper so fans and other people that are watching the NBA can look up to these people, and I just don't think there's enough of that stuff out there. So like I said, for listeners and people around yourself or whoever, I mean, for me, it's always been approach this article as if it's your last. And that's kind of how I've taken things and grown. But like I said, I appreciate all the thanks, man. Like, seriously, I read your work. I read everyone that I can, just to get different opinions. Like I said, I mean, I think if anything, it helps everybody out when you're reading other people's opinions, and kind of the whole point of, any article is to kind of persuade or change the opinion of what you think originally. And so it's always good to hear from other people. And like I said, I really appreciate all the thanks and thoughts.
Yeah. Hey, it's no problem at all, man. I mean, going back to touch on the NBA Twitter thing, I mean, it's a really unique community. Like you said, it's almost like when someone gets a job somewhere or someone gets a gig somewhere, it's like a celebration for all of us, in a sense. So, when I saw that you were going to Basketball Insiders, I mean, honestly, because like I said, I've played college ball, and so I have that competitive fire. So it's like one of those things where, like, yeah, Oliver's, making big moves. I'm really excited for him. But then in the other sense, I'm like, all right, I really got to get down and try to do something here. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
But it's cool. It's great because people consider you one of the younger ones that are doing this type of thing, and it provides hope for the guys like me who are trying to follow that path in a way. But definitely really respect the work you do, and I'm looking forward to it this season. And so, without further ado, let's kind of hop into the team that you cover the most, the Portland Trail Blazers. And speaking of your work, you just put out a very good article on Meyers Leonard, big man for the Blazers. I had no idea his backstory and what all he went through last year. It's kind of, I'm on the East Coast. The Blazers were, of course, a surprise team last year to the majority of fans. But the behind-the-scenes stuff with him getting injured, and it seemed like from what you said in your piece, he was just really mentally broken down. Really struggling last year, and it showed in his production. And between that and turning down the extension to try to prove himself, I mean, that's just a lot of pressure for a player to put on. I mean, I guess. Was this your first time really getting in depth with Meyers, and what did you kind of learn from this entire interview process?
Well, I mean, Meyers was at Media Day, and it's very easy. Like, when you go, it's so much easier to compare what story is going to be the best when you're at Media Day, because essentially you've got the whole lineup of players, right? They're all available to the media at some point. And in the Blazers' circumstances, they really go one by one. So this player will be available from 12:30 to 12:45. This player will be available 12:45 to 1. So you get a taste of every single player. And, as you're asking pretty similar questions for most players, I mean, there's changes and unique questions here and there. But for the most part, they're very, what are your expectations this season? Like, what are you in –
what did you work on? Stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. The very generic kind of questions, to be completely honest. And that's totally fine. But every player was very calm, collected, confident. And then you get Meyers Leonard, and he pops in here and is like, last year was the most stressful year of my life. And he goes into this greater detail of just like, kind of in that story, I turned down $40 million. I came from nothing. Like, what I don't even know what I was thinking, and he starts going into just all the backstory of him getting injured twice and how that mentally just broke him down, and how he lied to his family throughout the season, told them he was okay, he was fine, when really his shoulder was not fine, when really he didn't feel fine. And so I think it literally was the talking point at Blazers Media Day. And I don't know if everybody was super surprised by it, but a guy being drafted so high like Meyers Leonard has, and having these high expectations, especially in Portland where there's only two major sports teams, if you count soccer as one of them. But really the Portland Trail Blazers are like the be-all, end-all in Portland. So everybody talks about him. And when a draft pick like Myers Leonard gets drafted, everybody expects so much from a guy who's 19 years old coming into the league. And he just didn't meet up to expectations. And I don't think many people understand that Myers, only had 1 year in college to really develop and grow. He's 7'1". He's just got so much potential and upside that people just looked at the potential and upside and immediately gave that to him. And I just think that, it's tough on a guy like that. When you're drafted as high as you are in a city that really cares about basketball and the Portland Trailblazers overall, and you see a guy, like Damian Lillard exceed expectations so much at the 6th pick in the same exact draft, you just expect so much from a guy like Myers Leonard, and he just didn't meet up to expectations. So I think that whole story was very interesting, and I feel for a guy like Myers Leonard. I mean, it must be difficult. Like, their job, I don't know if I could be a professional athlete. I mean, everybody dreams of being that, but a guy like Myers Leonard, I don't know if I'd want to be in his shoes at all. I mean, the guy faces criticism on a nightly basis. He's got so much upside and potential that he knows he has. And, in practices, you see him really, really flourish and understand his role. And then when he gets into games, it's almost, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. And, he's coming in for a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge for the first 2 years. So comparing him to LaMarcus Aldridge just isn't fair. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So for me, that story, it tells itself, but the quotes that he had just really, really made it a lot more meaningful.
They were some intense quotes, and really quick touching on, you said that, you don't know if you could be a professional athlete, especially in today's world. I got my first taste, I was credentialed last year for the Washington Wizards, so I did some stuff with them. I'll be doing that again this year, but it was, walking in, of course, you get starstruck at first. These are the guys that you've been watching, since we were little. And and then you go in the locker room for the first time after the game, and you realize I had a moment for a second where we were just standing there and watching John Wall get dressed, and we were just standing in his locker waiting for the PR team to say, okay, well, he's open for questions.
Yeah,
and it just hit me. I'm like, we were watching this guy getting dressed, and we're just waiting for him to waiting to ask questions to him. He literally just got out of a game, and it was a loss that night. You know what I mean? So obviously frustrations are flowing, but it's just like, these guys have to deal with this every single day of their lives. After practice, people just don't realize that. So when I do see a player maybe lose it at a press conference or, not want to talk to the media, you don't really understand where they're coming from until you've experienced that. You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
It's so much stress. You really can't be yourself at any time, because especially today's world with the internet, Twitter, everything can get out in a second. So it's really hard to find the players that are candid until you get their trust, of course, to see the real side of them. But I'm with you. Myers is a guy with a ton of upside. And he's a guy who has a unique skill set at the 5 spot where he can stretch the floor, and he just hasn't been able to display that just because of injuries, which is a frustrating process. And like you said, being drafted 5 picks behind Lillard certainly doesn't help his case. But I think now that he's in the right place mentally, he's feeling good physically. I think this year the NBA kind of starts to put more of a notice on him, and of course he can't slack off because he's got Festus Ezeli and Mason Plumlee to battle every day in training.
Yeah.
So he's got his work cut out for him, but if he wants it, we're really going to see it. I listened to the Basketball Insiders podcast. Once again, guys, another great podcast that you should definitely subscribe to and listen to. Yesterday with Joel Brigham. And you brought up, which I thought was pretty interesting, another guy who is very under the radar, but had a productive season last season, Ed Davis. You said he put on about 25 pounds. I think you said he's up to 245.
Yep.
And a guy who averaged 6.5 points, 7.4 rebounds last year, nothing that's going to pop out at you, but he does this efficiently off the bench. I guess what do you expect from him? He's a guy who's been around the league for a while. What do you expect from him this year? He's going to be that guy, backing up Aminu, I'm going to assume, and really be looking to be more of a role in that reserve lineup that really only has, when you look at it, Allen Crabbe in terms of scoring and consistent play.
Yeah, I like Ed Davis. I just think he is the Patrick Beverley, I think, of this team, if you want to put it that way, or the Matthew Dellavedova of this team. And I know that I'm comparing him to point guards, but what I mean is intensity-wise and just like work ethic and willingness to go in and get dirty, I guess you could say, in the paint. He's got something none other that this Blazers front court has. And I think, it kind of showed last year. I mean, when Ed Davis was thriving and playing well, you saw it, the whole team kind of feed off that. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about Beverly and Dellavedova. Those guys give 150% all the time, and you can tell that's kind of the reason they're in the league in the first place. So for me, Ed Davis, I mean, him working out and getting, more muscle on that body just tells me he's ready to try and improve himself once again. He's up against a bunch of guys. I mean, Ezeli, Leonard, Aminu. You can go down the list of guys in this front court that have a chance and opportunity to do a lot of things. But, looking at it from the long term of things, I just think that Ed Davis brings a skill set that none of these other guys bring, which is just the kind of the knack, I guess you could say, the mentality of going out and getting every rebound. And I don't know what the statistic is, but I think I mentioned it on the podcast too. I don't know what the statistic is, but there is a statistic out there, and I forget the name of it, but it's from Nylon Calculus, and it's basically like rebounds that you're not supposed to get or rebounds that are contested with other players.
Yep.
And sorry for not giving the right term for it, but basically he has got to be up there in that top 10, 15, 20 range of guys who aren't supposed to get the rebound, who end up either getting the rebound or get a touch on it. And those guys are crucial. I mean, really, offensive rebounding is a crucial part of the game. Defensive rebounding is a crucial part of the game. But when you're talking about 50-50 balls, I guess you could call it, balls that are really they could be there for one of four different players in the front court, he is always fighting. And for me, that's a huge, huge thing that this team can kind of feed off of and use as kind of extra motivation when they need it. So I think Ed Davis's role is pretty clear. 20 minutes a night, come off the bench, and make sure these role guys and bench guys understand that they need to be on the floor 150% effort all the time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And not in terms of minutes, but in terms of impact, what you were saying with the rebounding. I mean, we've had every team that wins the championship every year has a player like that. I mean, most recently Tristan Thompson. We've seen how much
exactly
impact the game just by crashing the boards hard and embracing that role. I mean, they don't try to step out of what they do. They just embrace their role, and that's what makes the team better overall. But I mean, kind of moving down the list. And also, like I said, I listened to a lot of the podcasts that you're a part of, so I know your opinion on it already. But the addition of Evan Turner, obviously wasn't for the ideal amount money-wise. But, what did you get from him media day? What did you get from other players? I don't know if the team – because, the Wizards have been getting together and scrimmaging a lot, just running people up. I didn't know if the Blazers had how he's really fitting in, whether it's – playing or just locker room. Did you get any information there?
Yeah, he was pretty soft-spoken. I was hoping for more, honestly, just because everybody from Boston was telling me, he's a great guy to cover. He has all these great, excellent quotes, and, he's kind of off the wall a little bit. I was really hoping, he's going to come out and start, ET for president or something along those lines. I was hoping for a big time quote or just something to laugh at, really. But no, he was pretty down to earth, pretty real, I guess you could call it. He spoke of himself as just wanting to play. He can play 1 through 4. That's what he said, basically in a pinch, is he can play 1 through 4. And what he brings this team is defense, obviously, length, a little more athleticism on the defensive end of the court. But he basically, he talked about a bunch of different things. First of all, that he wasn't saying that he needed to start. He just wanted to play. However he can help the team, however he can do it, which I was impressed with because, coming into the season and everybody talking, the rumors were out there that ET was basically promised a starting role and with this contract and everything else. Now, that could be the case behind the scenes, but he didn't basically come out and identify that as being a crucial thing. Just that he wanted to help the team in any way that he could, and that he wanted to play whether it be 1 through 4, which, I mean, that to me tells me, you're in it to win it, and I think he's kind of embraced the mentality of this team. This team really is, they know their roles, they know what they need to do, and they go to work. And I know that the workouts, from what I've heard, he's played well, he's fit in. All these guys seem to have the same mentality and motivation behind it, which is, you look at Evan Turner, a guy who's been passed up on multiple times in multiple years. He's gone from 5 teams in 7 years or whatever the stat is. He's moved around quite a bit. And you look at some of these other guys, Ed Davis, another guy. Damian Lillard was questioned when he came into the league. Is he really a point guard? Is he really going to be able to, turn this Blazers team around? Is he really the answer? And all these guys have kind of lived up to expectations and more. And I think that's the mentality of this team, which is so great about it. I mean, because you look at these guys, they just want to work. They just want to prove people wrong every single day. And so they've worked out in San Diego. They did that a couple of weeks ago. These guys get together early, and they're always talking. They're all friends off the court and on the court. They get dinner, breakfast, lunch together. That's what's unique about this team. That's kind of what separates them, I think, more than anything. They might not be the most talented, or even like a top 6 or 7 most talented team in the Western Conference even, but what they make up for in team chemistry and knowing each other's roles and understanding that, putting in 110% effort all the time, that really changes the game for everyone on this team. And I think if you see that again this year, like I said in the podcast, I think I think they win over 50 games, or at 50 games. I think they're a top 4 seed. And I just wouldn't be surprised. You just at this point, I can't doubt them. Last year I doubted them, thought they wouldn't win over 30 games. They proved us all wrong. And I just think that they've assembled a group of guys that are willing to prove every minute of what they're worth. And, guys that are getting these contracts that are absurd and quote unquote, these guys are out to prove that they're worth it. So, Evan Turner is a great guy. I think that he's going to be a great addition to this team. How he fits in, I don't know yet. I'm still a little bit baffled and confused by why they brought Alan Crabb and Evan Turner together at the same time. I just thought you could use one or the other and be fine without. But if you're looking to build a team for the long haul and do what the Spurs or what the Golden State Warriors have, which is really keeping the team continuity together, keeping the core group together, paying the guys that need to be paid, and kind of giving them the comfortability to know that, hey, you're stable. You're here for the next 4 years. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about being moved. I think that's a huge, weight off of a lot of the players' shoulders.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, I don't think anybody was really questioning the action of bringing Turner in, because I think that's what this team was really missing, a do-it-all type of guy on the wing. And a guy that, like Turner, he's used to starting. He's used to coming off the bench. He's used to just doing what his role, and what his team needs him to do. So I think in that sense it was good. I'm with you on the Alan Crabb. I really thought they were just going to let him go. But if they bring him back and they want to play some small ball, which I'm sure they will, they can throw Turner at the 4. That can be an effective lineup as well for him. Just really quick, this is for my own personal information, because obviously I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. I actually played against Jake Layman a few times coming up.
Yeah,
I want to know how is he kind of adjusting, because of course people in Maryland, they're kind of closed-minded in that they think every player from Maryland should be drafted, and that's just not how the NBA works, obviously. But I think Jake can really bring a lot of things to an NBA team, whether it's length, athleticism, some defense. He can be, one of those guys that are a 3-and-D guy off the bench. Not high expectations for him, but did you get a chance to talk to him? How's he kind of fitting into this new lifestyle, and what do you see his role being for the team this year?
I actually didn't get a chance to talk to him. He didn't actually show up for the press conference or media day. It wasn't necessarily his decision. I think it was just the lack of media that wanted to talk to him.
Okay.
So, I mean, honestly, it's going to be difficult. If I'm being honest about it, I think it's going to be really difficult for him to even crack the rotation.
Yeah.
Pat Connaughton's kind of in the same situation. I mean, both those guys are very similar, I think. I look at both those guys, and they bring a lot of athleticism. You know, both those guys can dunk. They can run up and down the court very, very smoothly. They've got handles. They've got the three-point or the outside shot. They're both long and athletic in the sense that they can defend pretty well. But I just don't know. I mean, you look at this backcourt, man. It's so tricky to kind of run down and say, oh, well, he's going to get 5 or 10 minutes here. I just don't know if I see it right now. Layman was impressive in Summer League. I liked what he brought. I liked what Pat Connaughton brought. Both those guys, obviously East Coast guys. But I think he brings something, and he may be someone that they utilize down the line. I think, 2 or 3 years down the line, he can definitely be a rotational player. I think that he's going to be a guy that you can bring off the bench, 3-and-D, like you said. Like I said, him and Pat Connaughton both are really impressive. I think that they, we've brought in guys like Luke Babbitt previously and drafted those sort of players, and they haven't really worked out to the extent that we've wanted them to. But I think giving these guys a little bit of room to kind of improve themselves, grow, get acclimated to like what the NBA is all about, I think that's going to be the difference maker for those guys. And I think, giving them a couple of years just to kind of acclimate themselves, get used to kind of how fast the pace is, how different the players are. Yeah, they can exceed at a college level, but in the NBA, everybody's that much better. So, I like Jake Layman as a player. I think he's definitely got a personality and someone that wants to work, wants to prove himself, just like the rest of this team. But honestly, I don't know if I see him having a role this season. I think you could even see him go down to the D League and get some experience down there. Pat Connaughton as well, maybe a guy like that if they don't see a value for him there. If there's injuries, though, that may be an option. You may rest some guys and put a Layman or a Connaughton in the mix, but other than that, I don't see him getting too many rotational minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's gonna be a guy that's gonna spend at least next year, I think, in the D League for the most part, maybe even the second part. The problem with him at Maryland was just consistency. He'd have parts of the game where he would just be invisible. And there's a guy here that actually is a starter for the Wizards, Otto Porter, who suffers from the same thing. I think Porter can bring more than Layman can, but in a sense, I think they both kind of have the same skill set. Obviously Otto's game translates better right away to the NBA game. But that'll be definitely something interesting to see. They have, and another thing that I just wanted to point out real quick with Portland and giving crap now, it does kind of cripple them cap-wise for the future. Yeah. But it also sends a message out for when they do get room in cap or they're looking for trades to big-time free agents to know that, they're going to go all in for you. You know what I mean? And they're going to invest in you. And if you're on their team, they believe in you. I think that's why Lillard has really taking advantage of his situation. A guy coming from a mid-major college obviously has elite skills, but people don't realize if you have that confidence from your coach and your organization as a whole, it can do so much for your game.
Yep.
It kind of moving on to your latest piece with D'Angelo Russell, definitely an interesting guy. I had a chance to speak with him a little bit last season early on. It was Kobe's last game at Verizon. And I could sense he had some immaturity to him. I mean, of course, I don't know what people really expected. The kid's 18, 19 years old. I mean,
exactly.
When I think about what I was at that age, I don't know how these players can handle this pressure. But from what I gathered from your article, he's really on. He's grown a ton this past year. Now, of course, he had a rough year last year with the whole Nick Young thing and other incidents. But I think stuff like that is either going to make or break a player. He's either going to learn from it and really grow from it and be a successful NBA player mentally and physically, or his name will be one that we see next to the word bust that we've seen plenty of players have. But I guess along with the Myers Leonard thing, just like what did you learn? Were you really talking to D'Angelo Russell a lot before this interview, or did you really learn most of the information from this single story that you wrote?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, it was a really tough task to get D'Angelo on the phone at all. I've known him and his agent for a while, but just these guys are busy, even in the off season. You know, they've always got these different meetings or media events to attend or whatever the case may be. But he hadn't actually done any sort of interviews on basketball at all. I mean, really, there was the LA Times article that came out like right before mine, which I don't know how they got those quotes. I think they may have overheard some conversations with like between players or something. I'm not going to say that they were, not good quotes or whatever, but I just don't know if he was the guy actually saying that to them directly, or if it was more or less like a, overhearing in practice or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit strange to see that, but I mean, I learned a lot from D'Angelo Russell. I've been a big fan of his since he came into the league. Actually, no, that's not true. Before he came into the league, I said the Lakers should go after Jahlil Okafor, and I thought that was the better pick.
And I was with you. I'm with you on that boat too.
And I was totally bought into that idea. And, I saw D'Angelo Russell in Summer League. I thought he was pretty rough to begin with, last season specifically, and just like, I don't know if this is going to work out. The bright lights, all the rest of it, a point guard position. He's got to be a true point guard, not a shooter, not a scorer, and all this other stuff. And, about halfway through the season, I started watching a lot more Laker games and seeing him like actually kind of thrive under a coach that has been heavily scrutinized and didn't really know what he was doing, in my opinion. I didn't feel like Byron Scott was really the guy that was supposed to be in LA, but I think that was almost purposeful. They got him a better draft pick. Obviously, you get Brandon Ingram now. And I think that the Lakers knew that, let's usher Kobe out, let's play him a bunch, and we'll lose a bunch of games. And in the long run, we're going to get a better draft pick and hopefully build this team around another coach. So, learning from D'Angelo Russell, kind of what he was talking about, and my understanding was really just like, look, I've screwed up. Yeah, I've made mistakes. Yeah, it was very honest and open about, yeah, I've admitted my mistakes. Obviously, I've got to grow. I've got to improve. I've got to prove to people that I am this guy that you drafted. And I think when you think about being drafted that high in a city like LA when Kobe's being like retiring, that's just a terrible situation. Like, I just don't understand how you can even deal with that.
No, it is. And just to add really quick, I think coming into that situation, I don't think any of the Lakers players really knew what to do. Besides, really, in my opinion, Metta World Peace. I mean, because he's, a veteran.
He's got all the experience.
Right.
Yeah.
He understands it. But when I was in that locker room, like, it just didn't seem like the season as a whole, and that was early on, was just being taken seriously. I mean, it's kind of like everybody just had to be like, okay, we got to do this.
Yep.
And, I think one thing we'll really learn who D'Angelo Russell is as a player on the floor this year, because like you said, Kobe's gone. Byron Scott's gone, which I understand why Byron treated him the way he did, but at the same time, I really feel like, the leash was extremely short on the floor in terms of showing what he can really do, because while, his passes may not look fundamental at points, and while, his turnovers may look bad because of those type of no-look passes, flashy passes that he does, I just feel, going back to what we talked about before, when a player has confidence that his organization and his coach are behind him and just, roll the ball out and just say, go play, people don't realize how much that can do for a player. And with Russell, I mean, I know you're high on him in terms of potential, and upside with him. I really think that he can blossom into a really good player. Now, there's certain things that need to happen, to do that. This Lakers team is still very, very young, obviously, but I think kind of giving him the keys now and making sure that he's mature enough beforehand is the best way to go for the Lakers. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, no. That is the best way to go. I mean, you've got to give the keys to the kid. And I think that's what Luke Walton's going to do. You've seen it in Golden State when he was coaching them. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson had green light like all day long. They could do basically whatever they wanted. And when they screwed up, Luke Walton would set them aside and tell them, I mean, he's not going to be afraid to tell them. I think that's the bottom line is you've got to be able to give these kids that are 19 and 20 you can tell them whatever you want, but they come from a background like D'Angelo Russell comes from a background, a top high school recruit, a top college recruit, a top college player, a number 3 overall draft pick or a number 2 overall draft pick. Just like, you get this in your mind, and they have egos that they, whether it's valid or not, they've got these egos based on the past. They've started every game for every, high school from freshman year all the way to senior year. They've gone to college. They've played a bunch of minutes. So they're used to it. And when you throw them into the fire, I think that's the best way to do it. I don't think you need to tell them, like, look, I'm going to sit you on the bench because you're not ready. You've got, inexperiences here and here. You make way too many turnovers. Well, guess what? You can tell a player that all you want, but until he actually understands and learns it on the court, there's no way that he will learn that. And I think that for D'Angelo Russell, that's what needs to happen. Like,
Yeah.
That's where my opinion of the first part of the season, I'm not worried about his numbers. I'm not even going to look at his turnover percentage or ratio or anything like that. I think the second part of the season will be the telltale sign of whether D'Angelo Russell will become a perennial all-star, a top 5 point guard, or whether he'll just become another average point guard. And I think that will be the real telltale sign. Like I said, the first part of the season, he's learning with all these other guys, and he's got a bunch of young guys around him, and, it's just going to be a learning curve.
Yeah.
New coach, new system, new style of play. But I think that him showing excitement in it, him wanting to work harder, improve, get better, he just shows a much more mature attitude than he did last season. And admitting to those mistakes, being honest about it, that's going to be the number one thing for him. And knowing when he's made mistakes that he needs to try and develop that and get better at it is the number one thing for a guy like D'Angelo.
Yeah, and the situation that I kind of like to use, just from this summer and with all the criticisms against his game, because I think, I'm taking D'Angelo over Devin Booker, and, for the long run. And, Devin Booker had a very good year for the Suns last year, but I think it goes back to what we're saying where you just have to throw him in the fire. Devin Booker had nothing to lose with the injuries that, the Suns suffered from last year with Bledsoe and, Knight being banged up and everything like that. That's what happened. And Booker wasn't looking over his shoulder all year because he knew, okay, this is all I got. And it will end up being a great move for the Suns, going forward.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that's what D'Angelo has to look forward to this year. He's not going to be, have to look over his shoulder all the time when he turns the ball over and expected to be exiled, whether that's during practice or in the locker room after a loss or whatever. He's actually going to be able to learn. So in a sense, I'm actually approaching this season like it's his rookie year because I think he finally will get to be able to play his brand of basketball that he wants. And I think that's going to only help guys I'm always high on Jordan Clarkson. I really think he's a solid option at the shooting guard. I mean, I think on a really good team, he'd be a perfect 6-man.
He is, yeah.
But, for this team, I think he fits in well. But I think, like you said, you just give the keys to this kid, let him create for others, learn from his mistakes, realize there's going to be rough patches and frustrations. But then you also have to realize once he picks this up, I mean, it's going to be a fun team to watch. And, another question I wanted to ask you leading into, the fun team for the future, I just want to know, I mean, I know you're high on D'Angelo just like I am, but, who has the better career overall, do you think, in the end, D'Angelo Russell or Brandon Ingram?
Russell. I'm not high on Ingram, actually.
Okay.
I'm pretty low on him. I think he's got he's got the potential, I guess, if you want to put it that way, to be like a poor man's Kevin Durant. But, I don't know if it's all there. I'm a little bit skeptical. I saw in college glimpses of, like, good shooting. For him, it's consistency. Like for me, it's just like I don't know. Like every night it was different. And I feel like he can play small ball 4 potentially, but I think 3 is probably the position you'd want to play him in. He's got to develop even more of an outside shot than he did in college, I think, and adjusting to the difference in three-point line and just the defense that's being played on him. It's going to be difficult. I mean, if you're going up against LeBron James, you're going to have a difficult time.
Yeah.
If you're going up against a guy like Kevin Durant, you're going to have a difficult time. So I just think his learning curve is going to be a little bit more than a guy like D'Angelo Russell. Man, he could be great. Like I said, I'm not as high on him as everyone else is, I think. I just don't know if he's got the it factor for me.
Yeah, well, one thing that I kind of it kind of caught me off guard because I watched a fair share of Duke last year, but I think it was just because he was drafted. Him and Simmons were the 1-2 guy. Everybody knew it. Simmons had he obviously his weakness is his jump shot.
Yeah,
which made people believe that Ingram had a very good jump shot, and that's not the case. He's an average at best jump shooter right now, and at an NBA level, I would even go to say he's below average. That's why I think the decision to bring him off the bench to at least start the year, I think it's a very good decision.
Yep.
And to learn behind a guy like Luol Deng, who I'm sure will teach him so much, kind of like a Karl Anthony Towns, Kevin Garnett, if you will. I mean, obviously Luol Deng's not of the level of Kevin Garnett. In a vacuum, but I think he can learn a ton from him and Walton. I mean, Walton played the 3. He's going to be dishing out information to him and experience. So I think where Ingram landed is the right place, but it's how they choose to bring him along is really going to impact, I think, how he does with his career. But I don't. Obviously, you have the Laker loyal fans thinking that they're gonna, sneak in with the 8th seed. This team's still gonna be, in my opinion, one of the worst teams in the league. They just have too much youth on the team. It's gonna be a learning experience, but they have potential to climb quickly. Like a Minnesota when these young players do get enough experience. So that's definitely something to wait and see, type of thing. But Oliver, I mean, we're cutting short on time here, so I'm gonna kind of do the outro now. I want to thank you one more time so much for joining us. And really quick, just tell the people how they can reach you on Twitter, if you have a Facebook page, and plug any articles that if you're working on one, or if of course. To the folks listening, please go check out his Myers Leonard piece and D'Angelo Russell piece. You won't be disappointed. But, Oliver, if you just want to plug anything that you have.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm on Twitter at @OMaroneyNBA. You can find basically everything there. BasketballInsiders.com has all my work on it as well. As far as, working on pieces, I mean, I've got a piece probably, and this is all contingent on agents and talking to players and getting the right time with them and stuff. But I've got a piece coming out probably late this week or early next week on Anthony Bennett, and that's I guess I'm telling it now. And then Justin Anderson is probably the other guy I'm going to have a piece on here. I don't know how soon, but those 2 guys, and then potentially Terrence Ross before the season starts. So those 3 guys, and then I'm going to have a lot. I've got probably 4 or 5 in the docket. I'm just, I'm always talking to different guys. And so, yeah, whenever I get a chance to try and get those done. But, yeah, I'll have those 3 probably within the next couple of weeks, and then potentially some others too.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be looking forward to each and every one of those. I mean, you said you're probably going to be working on, around at least 2 or 3 at the same time. I think, it's safe to say that the NBA season is back and kicking. And I think, I think we can be happy about that. Of course, that's more work for us, but that's what we do it for, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, I don't do anything for the money here. This is all about just enjoying it, man. I enjoy watching these guys play. I enjoy telling the stories. So nothing here is, for me, it's all just a passion. And, I like I said, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you having me on. And, Anytime you guys need anybody to come back on, I'm happy to. And if you guys have any questions or anything, or anybody has any questions, I'm always open on Twitter. I try and respond to everybody and make sure that they get their 2 cents in. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, man, that was good. That was going to be my next thing. I'm sure we're going to be having you on again during the season, whether
Sure.
that's just with Blazers stuff. I know we are kind of short on time. I wanted to get to some Houston Rockets stuff, but I'm sure we'll be able to touch on that sometime during the season. But definitely thank you for your time, Oliver, and for everybody listening. Go follow him, Maroney NBA, on Twitter. You can follow me at Kobe Jacobino. You can follow Brett at 33 Trigger. I want to thank everybody for listening. And until next time, signing off for Kobe Jacobino and Brett Roberts.